Hi, today we're going to talk about doing unit studies with your preschool child. In my other video, I already covered the benefits and importance of units. So a super easy way to get started is with a program called 5 in a Row. You use a classical book that you read a few times during the week. Then each day you pick a few activities to do that relate to the book. And then later you could add in more books if you want to. So I'm going to put the details in the notes about 5 in a Row. I've never actually bought the curriculum. I've done a Google search for the books, and then I pick one, and then I search for free units because there's a lot of mom websites out there, and they have printables and activities. So today I'm going to show you one unit study. The first one I ever did was The Story About Ping by Marjorie Flack. It takes place in China, so most preschoolers probably don't know where that is. And you could do a Google map search that would take you from your house, and then it zooms out and comes back in on the other side of the globe to China. Or you could print out an old school map and have them trace like the Yangtze River and then color in China and the water around it. Or you could, one year I made a passport and glued in pages to make like their picture with their information. And we kept track of our countries that we traveled to with the map. And then I had printable labels so they could put the flag on for each country. So once you've gone over where the story takes place, you could start reading. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you so you can see what it's like. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young duck named Ping. Ping lived with his mother and his father and 2 sisters and 3 brothers and 11 aunts and 7 uncles and 42 cousins. Their home was a boat with 2 wise eyes on the Yangtze River. So it goes on about how they would go out each morning to feed, and the last one back gets a little smack on the booty. And so Ping never wanted that, and one day he stays out, he didn't hear the call, and so he loses the boat and ends up going down the river on an adventure before he finds his way back home. So I'm going to show you a bunch of activities that you could do with just this one book. So I would probably start with a letter activity. So I like to just take a box because then they feel like they're getting mail. You could also put it in a basket or just do pictures on a piece of paper. So there's my letter D, and I would go over big D, little d, they say duh, and then I put in things in my box that start with D. So I have a dresser, a doll, and a dice. And so we would go over what those each sound like. And then maybe the next day, I might put in some different things. And then on the third day, I'd probably put in something that doesn't start with D. And then they have to figure out what doesn't belong. So that's something that you can do with letter D. You can also make a craft like this. So there's 2 different versions of a D duck. You don't have to do them both, or you can find something that's simpler. So depending on their skill, I might have them cut this out. I'd probably draw it for them to cut out. But otherwise, I might just do the pieces for them if they're younger. And I like to keep a bag of craft eyes, googly eyes, just for fun. They like those. And this was totally optional. I just glued some feathers on there. Now for math, there's a lot of different things you could do. If you had an empty egg carton and some plastic eggs, you could have them practice counting the eggs, or same thing like if you have rubber duckies. Sometimes you can buy or make tangrams. So a bot set, these are usually going to be made of plastic, but I made mine out of a cereal box and I covered it with wrapping paper. I've also done it with like colored duct tape before. So you can take I taped them all together so you could see how they fit together. But basically you take these shapes and then you can do different patterns with them. And this gives them great manipulation with flipping and turns, which they'll need later on. So this one is a duck tangram, and then they just fill in where those pieces go. You can find a ton of these online. You can print them. I hand drew mine because that's what I had available. So here's a rocket. And then when they get more experience, you can find patterns and don't fill in the pieces for them. So this one's a squirrel. Another thing that I did for my son, he liked color by numbers. So I made him a whole set of these, And I couldn't afford to print stuff at the time, so I just hand drew them. And so I gave them a different duck every single day. So this one's a northern shoveler. There's a wood duck, a ruddy duck, a mandarin duck. So there were a ton of these. And for him, because he was advanced in math, these were addition ones, but you could just do like numbers. So you could find pictures on a Google search and then copy them over to a Word program, print it off, and just write in the numbers of the colors and give them a legend. You could also have them practice making ducks out of Legos. These were just two that I made up, but you could find patterns online. And then you can use these ducks to act out different stories. And then for science, you could cover the life cycle of a duck. So I've got a bunch of different pictures to show how the egg hatches, how they have that little egg tooth that helps them get out. And then when they come out, the mom has to take them around, show them how things are done, and then they grow up into adult ducks before having their own eggs. And so it's a life cycle. And so cycles are super important for children to learn. So you definitely would want to cover that at some point. And then we like to keep a science journal. It's a good practice for them to be able to capture their thoughts, and then they can, the next time they pull it out, they can go, oh yeah, I remember doing that. That was so much fun. So we did one, does it float? So I gave him a bunch of things and he had to predict whether they would float or not. A good thing to give them is something like an orange. So you can give them a peeled orange and one that still has the peel on, and one of them will float and the other one won't. Why? It has to do with buoyancy and air. And so that you can tie that back to the ducks. Another one that you can do is about oil spill. So like the importance of pollution. So once a feather gets stuck in oil, then it sinks down in the water. So like once ducks get in all that yucky oil, they need to be cleaned off. Another one is you could make a paper feather and then have them spread vegetable oil on it and drop water and tilt it, and the water will just come straight down off of there. And that's because ducks have an oil spot on their backs, and they sit there and they preen and they rub that oil all over in order to make themselves waterproof. Another fun thing you could study would be eggs. So an excellent experiment is you can dissolve the whole eggshell. So you fill up a cup with vinegar and you put your egg in there, and after probably a few hours it will start to get bubbly, and then after a few days you can take it out and it's scummy, and then you'll realize like, oh, the whole shell's gone. And my son, he happened to lose a tooth at the same time, so we put that in there too, and the tooth, it will go away so fast because eggshells and teeth are both made of calcium carbonate. If you don't have a tooth, you could also use white chalk, and those small pieces will just dissolve right away, and it helps them to understand why they need to brush their teeth so much. Plus it's cool. So once you have your dissolved shelled egg, it's very rubbery and you can kind of toss it around and squeeze it a little bit, not too much because otherwise it will bust, but it's pretty firm. And so you can do different things. You can put it in corn syrup and it will shrink down, and then you can put it in a glass of water. I like to use colored water. We did pink, and it made it swell up and get really big. And then we took it outside and played with it until it broke. So it was really fun. You could also do how eggs are super strong. The arch is the strongest shape in nature. So we talked about how the St. Louis Arch was built like that, but we didn't actually visit it at the time. So you can take boxes of cartons of eggs and lay them out, and then your kid can actually walk on eggs. My husband, he weighs over 200 pounds and he can do it too. So eggs are super strong. You can also just go to a pond and observe ducks, maybe even feed them if your city allows that. So for social studies, you should probably learn something about China. There's a great book at the library on the Yangtze River. I think it's called the Yangtze River, and it shows you the different areas of it. You might be able to find like a YouTube on it. You could also study the Great Wall or the Terracotta Army. You could have Chinese food or even tea. You could even, you know, watch Mulan. So for playing, you usually want to introduce some way of playing. So I made this sensory bag, basically just a regular gallon-sized bag, and I put some water in it, not too much, a couple drops of food coloring, and then I put in some artificial leaves and flowers, and you could have them lay this out. And the nice thing about this is that it's no mess. So I don't know if you can see that, but then you could take your little rubber duckies and have your child play that the ducks are swimming. So you could also do the same thing if you don't mind a little bit of mess with a plain bucket like this. Or I like these big ones like this. Or one time we built a whole river out of aluminum foil. So you use like the sturdy, the heavy duty kind, and you can fold it, different pieces together, fold it over a bunch so that it's basically like a V. And we did a whole long strip of it and poured water down that, and so it was like a river, and they could practice floating things down there. So there's lots of different ways to play with ducks. So I also like to keep a basket of musical instruments, so that way when we do songs, they have these different things that they could pick from. I've got an egg shaker, and we just happen to have these duck whistles. So you could do different songs, like that one that's like, one little duck with a feather on his back, he led the others with a quack, 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 quack. Or the 5 little ducks. And the great thing about these songs is it helps kids to practice rhythm and patterns, which will help them with reading later on as well as music. So here's how this one goes. 5 little ducks went out to play over the hill and far away. When the mama duck said, quack, quack, come back, only 4 little ducks came back. So, and then you just count down all the way till no little ducks come back. You could also bring in some other books. So these were ones that I just happen to have around my house. So this one's 10 Rubber Duckies, and it's a countdown book so that the ducks go away. This is 5 Little Ducks, that song I just sang. This one is by Jan Brett. She also wrote The Mitten. This one's called Daisy Comes Home. And if you've never read one of her books, the great thing is that she has peekaboos about what's coming on the next pages. So this one is actually set in China as well, and it's about hens, so it's a little bit different. Here's another great book called Agatha's Feather Bed, and it also has peekaboos. This book is a little bit different though, because it's a woman who owns a shop, and her whole thing is everything comes from nothing. So the peekaboos on this is like there's wheat, and from that we have bread. So it goes through a whole bunch of things that your kids might not otherwise think about. Until one day she gets her new feather bed, and she's so excited to lay down, but then knocking at her window, so there she is with her long hair that she's getting ready for bed, and then one night knocking at her window are all these naked geese. And she's so surprised, but they're angry at her because her feather bed has used their feathers, and so she gives them her credit card and says, go stay at the hotel for a few days and then come back. And then at the end of the story, they come back and she's made them all little coats from her hair. And so it's a cute little story that also relates to poultry. So you can also find other books at the library. You could just type in like ducks and you'll get a ton of hits. Another really good one that I don't have is called Make Way for Ducklings. And this one is like a classical book, and it covers a lot of the life cycle of the duck. So we also did that one. There's also the cute little duck and goose ones where it's a duck and a goose and they're best friends and they always do things together. So you can do crafts. I personally don't like to do crafts because I don't know what to do with them. So they like end up all over the house and like, I just don't know what to do. So I just like never do crafts. But I wouldn't mind doing like an art project. So I'd probably have them take like a yellow crayon and press really hard to make a duck. And then we could color blue watercolor over it. And you'll get where the crayon will resist, which is a cool little science experiment as well. And the great thing about doing art versus crafts is that art, they are actually inventing something. A craft means that it's going to come out just like what somebody else made. So there's not any creativity in crafts. So the great thing about crafts is that it just gives them the practice of building something, whereas art, they're actually making something. So that's why I prefer art over crafts. And then the other thing that a lot of moms like to do is like a food that goes along with it. So I can't really think of an obvious one. I mean, maybe you would want to make like eggs, but I saw like a cute one where it was like a rice cake and they put blueberry yogurt on it. Ugh, I don't know. And then she had little duck crackers, which it was so cute looking. But I just personally skipped that because it just stresses me out to try to get all the things. So there's a whole bunch of ideas of what you could do with just one book. And you could, do that book for like 2 weeks if you wanted to cover all the things, or you could use it to build on something else. So like we did ducks and then we did dinosaurs. And so the connection there was life cycle and eggs. So that's how I like to build these up to each other, but you could just pick something completely different. So there's how you do it, and it's not a big deal.